I'm Adam Willems, lead reporter at the Financial Revolutionist.
Hi, I'm Brad Giles, Senior Vice President of Marketing and Sales Enablement at Ingenico.
Thank you so much for being here, Brad.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so sort of first, I'd love to hear what you're doing at Money 2020 on site, sort of what your aims have been and what your impressions have
So Money 2020 is an interesting event for us. It's not a traditional event that most companies will go to look for new opportunities to sell into. For us, it's more being in the middle of the payment ecosystem within Money 2020 and meeting with many of our existing partners and customers, and also looking for new technologies and new trends that we can keep an eye on as we continue to look forward in the industry.
been. Understood. Are there sort of new trends that have really caught your eye here?
Uh, to be candid, no.
Yeah, that's fine.
AI continues to bubble up in everyone's mind and talking about it. I think the wave of consumer-based buy now, pay later alternative payment methods has settled in now. A couple of years ago, you may remember it was all the rage at the
Mm-hmm.
event,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's still here, but a little less prevalent. In typical fashion, it ebbs and flows, and now that the technology is there. People have figured out what they want in the technologies. They're figuring out how to integrate them into their flows and their consumer-facing experiences. Now, which ones do they pick? And then they have to do the hard work of actually integrating it into their tech stack and making it work.
Right, absolutely. For a giant like Ingenico, I'm wondering what the process is like to actually decide whether a new technology like BNPL or 2 years ago a crypto-based technology is hype worth buying into and actually investing in versus sort of waiting out and seeing.
Great question. I think Ingenico looks at it a little differently than other companies.
Sure.
What I mean by that is so often companies are looking at the needs of their customer. And at Ingenico, we think differently because really it's ultimately the consumer who we need to be thinking about. What's
Mm-hmm.
that consumer expectation and desire going to be? How does that impact the merchant? How does that then continue upstream and impact, let's say, the acquirer or the ISV?
Right.
And then from there, how can Ingenico support in that?
Right.
So I like to use the term, shows my age, play the tape to the end.
Sure.
The
Yeah.
end is the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
And we spend some real energy in looking at that consumer trend. And a great example of that is what happened with COVID. So many people during COVID got comfortable with buying online, and they started to like buying online and all the benefits it provides,
Mm-hmm.
the personal attention that they could get while they're sitting in their home looking at a computer. When they went back to the store, they felt a little disconnected because they were looking for that same type of experience in the store.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see a lot of merchants now are trying to figure out how can they do a better job at delivering more of an online experience when the consumer is actually in the store.
What does that look like? Delivering an online experience
That's
in a brick and mortar setting.
another great question. It's really a blending of the personal attention
Okay.
and accessibility. And what I mean by that is, think about when you're online and you're looking for something, they pop up alternatives or comparisons, right?
Mm-hmm.
The systems are automatically calculating and presenting that to you. Well, you can have that same experience in the store, whether it be through an associate with maybe some type of handheld technology device that gives them access to the information, or through kiosks, or
Right.
through other unattended means as someone walks throughout the store. That's a prevalent way that we're really seeing a pickup in interest
Okay.
across the retail segment.
Okay. And how much of that is something that Ingenico pushes versus something that's more sort of inbound demand from a merchant?
I don't like to use the word push, but
Encouraged,
we
maybe.
we like to ask a lot of questions and really understand the challenges that our customers are facing.
Okay.
We push our customers a little bit to think all the way to the consumer. We actually have a global executive summit, a global advisory board that meets 3 or 4 times a year virtually and a couple times in person. And one of the biggest pieces that came out of that, and the last one that we had in Dublin, was the acquirers now realizing that they really need to put more energy into understanding the ultimate consumer
Mm-hmm.
requirement
Mm-hmm.
and how that backs up. So we are working with them now on coming up with ways to to collaboratively, competitors all working together basically to come up with research and data that ultimately is going to benefit the industry.
Right. Right. That's really interesting. So it's almost like a consortium of sorts of sort of these different competing merchants
Yeah,
or
consortium is a difficult word because of global
sure.
regulatory things. You have to
Sure.
be careful with that word. But it's more of an executive user group
Yeah.
to share ideas.
Understood.
That's really what it's about.
Understood. Um, I'm curious also about sort of what it means concretely for Ingenico to be a globally focused sort of payments giant versus something that focuses exclusively on a U.S. regulatory or economic landscape.
Yeah, that's part of the challenge, but to be candid, part of the fun of being a global company
Mm-hmm.
because you get to see not only the regulatory aspects globally and how they change and needing to create technology. So they're going to filter down not only through the verticals, but also through the required regulations country by country as we roll out technology. Um, but also the use cases and the way merchants and consumers are actually interacting and changing. The most obvious example is pay at table is everywhere in Europe. It's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
really nowhere in the U.S. It's just starting to
Right.
take off now, and it's been in Europe for years.
Right.
So we see those different types of differences, not region by region, literally country by country in some
Right.
regions.
Right. That's really interesting, and it demonstrates sort of what the market potential is to introduce those kinds of new technologies or new technologies to that country into a country like the U.S. pay by table.
Right.
That's a huge market gap that you could help fill.
And another interesting thing we're finding is there's a generational aspect to
Mm-hmm.
that consumer interaction that is also layered globally. I'll use the U.S. as an example. My mother-in-law still
Mm-hmm.
likes to write checks, and her sister actually likes to go to the utility company and pay with cash once a month. Literally,
Wow.
she's doing that today. I'm reasonably technically savvy. I can't remember the last time I used cash. I still use my chip card a lot or my NFC card.
Mm-hmm.
My kids, 25 years old, they never carry cash. They have no cards on them whatsoever. Everything is on the phone. And as that generation starts to become more independent and have more discretionary income,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to drive more the escalation of the changes
Right.
because the scale will tip to more digital focus and less physical focus as those generational changes.
Right.
Interesting thing is in some areas around the world, that's happening faster. In other areas around the world, we anticipate it might take one more generation
Right.
before that we actually see that.
Right. Yeah, that's fascinating.
It's right.
Yeah.
People don't always think about like the generational aspect of it, but with technology and generations, you really need to consider that because there's a
Right.
big difference.
Right. And
Yeah.
a cultural component,
Yeah.
certainly. I have two more questions.
Sure.
One is, what do you anticipate for Ingenico in the coming year?
The coming year, this is actually a very exciting year for us.
Sure.
Everyone knows Ingenico is the terminal company. We
Mm-hmm.
40 plus years, we pioneered much of what's considered table stakes today
Right.
decades ago,
Right.
which is a really good thing. One of the challenges with that, though, is we evolve the organization, or it's hard for companies to stop thinking of us as that terminal company. But when you look at the business, so much of what we do goes well beyond the terminal. Right? People are still going to need the physical terminal for quite some time to come.
Mm-hmm.
But the value that's added at that point of transaction is really where the difference is made, and for the merchant and ultimately the consumer. Um, as an organization, we used to just enable payments, right? Accept a payment. Now we have three pillars of that we're focusing on. One is still accepting the payment, whether
Right.
it be with a terminal or through some type of soft pause that we can provide. The next is manage,
Right.
managing the estate, whether it's a large estate or a small estate, managing it, software updates, adding new applications, health checks, things like that. And then the last one, which we really see the growth area, not just for us, but across the business, is enhancing the payment. Okay. I like to use the term turning a payment transaction into a consumer interaction.
Okay.
And we are now to the point where it's starting to happen. Where now we've been seeing this coming, we've been working on it for 3 or 4 years now, and we're actually seeing that consumer interaction piece of it starting to bubble up. So you'll see a lot more emphasis on that area of our business in the coming couple of years. What you're also going to see is because of the depth and breadth of what we can offer, we've had to change a little bit in the way we work with our customers
Okay.
because we need to go a little deeper with them than we historically did
Mm-hmm.
on what their challenges are, what their business opportunities are, and how we can take those solutions and combine them in the appropriate way to meet those specific needs that those customers of ours have.
Understood. And you mentioned that, Ingenico is known as the terminal company. And
Was,
was.
we're
Well, how did you overcome that is
working
my
on that.
question. Yeah. Or
Okay.
how are you overcoming it?
Some of it is through thought leadership.
Okay.
I'd encourage you to check out our blogs, particularly in the U.S. We never really talk about the terminal. We're talking about the market, where it's
Sure.
going, trends, what's impacting those trends, how to capitalize on those trends, things like that. That's one. Two is the emphasis we're putting on the technologies itself in our development. We've
Okay.
recently hired a new head of global solutions, a new chief solutions officer, who really has that eye for adding the value well beyond the terminal.
Okay.
And third is, I know this sounds basic, but it's important, is retooling our sales teams to be able to have those conversations with our customers
Mm.
to really benefit the customer.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it doesn't really, it's not important to us that we just sell something to a customer. What's really important to us is that we help that customer solve the challenge. Now, customer wins, we win, we create a longer lasting relationship. It just, in this business environment, it works better for everyone if we're going to market that way.
Right. Absolutely. That's fascinating. And I imagine it's quite a heavy lift, sort of operationally, to retool sales teams to be able to talk about a much, you know, wider aperture of products and solutions and pain points.
Part of it is the salespeople, but it's also the people that we have supporting the sales teams.
Mm-hmm.
Because you'll find in any major engagement with a customer, the salesperson is shepherding through a lot of moving parts in a
Sure.
very complex environment. Um, we we proactively engage multiple people within the organization directly with our customers on a regular basis to ensure that we're able to cover all of the little nuances
Mm-hmm.
that can really make or break the success that our customer has
Right.
in solving for whatever that challenge is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. My last
I,
question is whether, sorry, yes,
I was just
please.
saying, I hope I'm not leaning too heavy on the sales
No,
side
no,
in
no,
this
no,
for you.
no.
So,
That's great. That's
right.
great. Yeah, thank you. My last question is whether there are any questions I haven't asked that you feel like I should have.
Um, you've asked a lot of really good ones.
Thank you.
Well, I guess I have a question for
Sure.
you. You talk with a lot of organizations and companies across fintech and the entire payments ecosystem.
Right.
Because of that broader independent view that you have, you're
Mm-hmm.
looking out through a very non-biased, clear lens.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see are going to be the bigger changes or pivots that you think is going to happen related to payments in the next, 3, 4, 5 years?
Yeah, I think a big one. I lived in India for a while also, and I saw the introduction of UPI, the Unified Payments Interface,
Mm-hmm.
and um, it's interesting seeing the Indian payments landscape exists sort of light years ahead of where the US is at the very least. France is a different question altogether, but um, India now is connecting its instant payment system with Singapore, for example,
Right.
offering sort of a positive canary in the coal mine for where things could be headed. And I could totally see um, really globally focused payment providers moving into the international payments, sort of cross-border instant payment space. Obviously, that requires quite a bit of sort of regulatory changes, but I could see that happening in the next 5 years in a way that could totally sort of, I think, upend the ecosystem where incumbents that exists already in several markets can sort of use their existing rails in a way that sort of establishes dominance, or major EU based or Europe based payments providers like Form 3 moving into the US and being able to see some success that way. That's generally what I anticipate, but also I could be totally wrong. I mean,
Yeah,
2 years ago, like I said, our conversation could have been almost exclusively crypto focused, and that
right.
came and went. So um,
You never know.
you really never know.
Until it happens, you never know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that about the globalization
Sure.
aspect, because one of the things that we saw 3 or 4 years ago was there's a lot of really strong technology out there
Right.
in the payment space. The challenge we've always had is connecting it.
Right.
As an example, if I'm an acquirer and I want to bring on a buy now pay later application,
Mm-hmm.
I have to select the one I want, and then I have to go through up to a year and hundreds of thousands of dollars of development work and certification work to certify it. And if I pick the wrong one and I have to
Right.
do it again, I have to go back to ground zero. So one of the things we're focusing on is reducing some of that burden by creating more of a platform approach
Okay.
to multiple applications where we do most of the heavy lifting on the integration and certification journey.
Sure.
We can't do all of it because there's that last mile of it, if you will, that needs to be done company by company
Mm-hmm.
to reduce that burden and hopefully make these technologies more readily available to the broader market with less friction.
Right.
Where it's a cloud-based platform. We have several partners on it now that we're currently launching with, and it's going to be exciting to see how that starts to be adopted into the market. And the big acquirers or ISVs can now have, with less overhead to them, have more choice of the types of value-add applications and services
Mm-hmm.
that they're going to offer out to their merchant customers, which in turn creates that better consumer experience.
Right.
So
That's really interesting. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens,
more to
but it
come
makes
on
sense.
that. You'll hear more about it in the
Yeah,
future.
absolutely. Yeah, and it makes sense that you're sort of anticipating that, at least sort of from a meta structural level, and seeing where things roll out over time. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's the fun stuff.